All right, everyone, we are recording this session. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Jeff Weinrack, and I am proud to be district trainer this year. A few Zoom items before I turn it over to Tom. Because we have a significant number of people on this Zoom meeting, we're keeping everyone muted except for the presenters. If you have a question, there's two ways you can do that. One is you'll see at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there'll be a chat button. You can click on the chat and type in your question. Make sure that it goes to everyone as opposed to a private chat. And we will read the chat question to Tom or to Peter when they're on a break. The other option is there's another button at the bottom of your screen called Participants. And if you click on Participants, you will see a list of everyone who's on the call. But then in the bottom right corner, there should be a button that says Raise Hand. And if you click that button, a blue hand will appear on the screen that will signify to me or to Tom that you have a question you want to ask. And again, when there's a break, we will say, so-and-so has their hand raised. We'll go ahead and unmute you, or you can unmute yourself and then go ahead and ask your question. So you can either do it through the chat or through raising hands. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Tom.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Okay. I want to welcome you to the sixth session of the 2020 District 5520 Grant Management Training. This evening, this is kind of the schedule of events. I'll do a brief introduction, and Governor Gary will also welcome us. I'll talk about what's new. Our stewardship chair and Scott will take attendance, and we may do that a couple times throughout. That'll be followed by our district grant chair talking about district grants, Peter Falley, and I'll follow up with global grants. So at this point, I'd like to invite Governor Gary to give us some of his perspectives about the grant program and how it fits in with Rotary.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate that. Are you guys hearing me okay? I tell everybody I'm way out in the boonies, and I've been kind of okay. Good. I think this is the last of the scheduled grant training sessions, and so we've trained a lot of Rotarians, and I think that it's so important. So I'll talk about that first, and then I want to say a special thank you tonight too. But first off, thanks to everybody that's getting trained tonight. It's really important in the overall scheme of how we do things in Rotary. You know, Rotary really only has two major tools. One of those is the Rotary Foundation and our local charitable giving. The other, of course, is all the volunteer effort that Rotarians put in. So this tool that we have through our foundation and through our grant giving it's really it's just an amazing tool that we have. And so I'm thinking about this a little bit because I've struggled with how to bring to people how important it is in this particular time. You know, now that we're in the time of the pandemic and we're meeting virtually and doing all those things, it's really an opportunity for Rotarians to step up and do something really special in our communities. And Rotary International has recognized that by giving us some new sort of special rules related to our district grants particularly, and some to our global grants, so that we can address that. And I know that Tom and his group are going to address that in the training. But just as an overview, you know, they're giving us the opportunity, if we have grants that we can't complete because of the coronavirus, we're able to repurpose that money to use it expeditiously. And there aren't very many charitable organizations, I think, that are as agile as we are in Rotary, because we do a lot of things at the local level to do that. Also, for those of you who are thinking about doing grants next year, and actually everybody that's doing this training is thinking about doing grants next year, I hope. There's some opportunity to do some coronavirus issues now and get reimbursed for them in our grant proposals next year, and that's a new wrinkle. And there are some reduced requirements for global grants too that we're going to talk about. So all of that just gives us a special opportunity to reach out and show people what Rotary is really made of, and what we as Rotarians are made of. So thanks to all of you for being on tonight. I think you'll get a lot of good out of it. Secondarily, in each one of these, I've thanked Tom and Jeff and Ann and Peter and, the presenters and their group, but I want to direct this at them. This is, I think, the sixth training in 3 weeks, and it's a huge amount of work. And Tom and Jeff and Peter and Ann, you guys have done an amazing job to just stick to it and put all these together and to train several hundred Rotarians, I think, or more than 100 Rotarians. And I'm just impressed and amazed with what you all have done here. And I want to thank you one more time for everything that you're doing to provide this grants training. In my speeches to clubs, and particularly to club board members, I've told them that they could expect the grant training this year to be special, because I said, Tom being a former Nuke Navy guy, that I was sure that they would be more organized than they've ever been. And Tom, I think that's panned out. That's been very true. And I've heard a lot of good things about the training. So thanks to all of you guys for what you've done. And I'm gonna back off and let you move forward with your grant training. So good luck.
Well, thank you, Governor Gary. Before we get into this, I just wanted you to see who the foundation committee is this year. I am the DRFC, the District Rotary Foundation Committee Chair. And as you can see, I have a couple other hats. I'm also doing global grants this year and major gifts. Peter Fowley from Silver City is our district grants chair, as well as handling the district grants. Ann Scott is our stewardship chair. Linda Woodward will be handling polio this coming year. Mark Abramson from Albuquerque Del Sol will be the Paul Harris Society chair this year. Allison Pannell from Los Alamos will be handling our Peace Fellows and Scholars. And we've had excellent candidates each of the last 3 or 4 years. And we've had 3 years in a row, we've had a candidate selected. So if you know an outstanding young man or woman that might be interested in this, the peace programs that Rotary has, please let her know. And lastly, if you have not attended PETS, you may not have heard about this, but we have installed a new a donor recognition program called the Triple Crown Circle. And what that entails is recognition for large donors who continue to give. And members of the Triple Crown Circle are major donors. They are also active Paul Harris Society members, as well as being Bequest Society members. Rick Akins, past district governor Rick from Rio Rancho Sunrise, will be heading that up. And just so you know what I think the potential for Triple Crown Circle is, I ordered 200 pins. So I'm sure you'll be hearing from Governor Rick. What are we trying to do for this session? We wanted to qualify your club to participate in the upcoming 2021 Rotary Year District Grant and Global Grant program. For global grants to participate as either a host or international host. Also, we want to make sure you're familiar with Club Runner's District Grant Module, as well as Rotary's Grant Center. What's new? Governor Gary talked about briefly the changes to the district and global grants for COVID-19, and I'll go into that in a little more detail. And secondly, we put in a district grant for global grant community assessment. And let's talk about that. Global grants require, as part of the application, a community assessment be conducted. Sometimes this costs money. Because it is a prerequisite for a global grant, it cannot be included in the global grant project budget. Therefore, we have been authorized and have put $500 in the district grant fund. It's already there, and we put it in the budget that was just approved to conduct this. And it'll be processed through the Club Runner grant module because it is a district grant. But unlike normal district grants, it may be conducted and will likely be conducted outside of the confines of the district. Right now, we limit district grants to one per club. But because this is in support of a global grant, then any club that is eligible to apply for a global grant may also ask for this particular district grant to support the community assessment. And one other thing, Peter will be talking about the deadlines associated with district grants, but there really aren't any for this particular grant because it's tied to a global grant, and global grants basically don't have a calendar. They just happen when they happen and roll in from one year to the next. So that is available for the first time, and we've provided for that in the budget. Next thing, on March 24th, the trustees met and approved COVID-19 district and global grants. For global grants, first of all, a club and or district may only get one of these. And the major difference is that global grants require 30% of the project funds to come outside of the host country. The trustees are waiving that for COVID-19 related district grants. Again, either the district or a club may only get one of these. And that's because they don't want people to get used to funding global grants totally internally. For district grants, normally you cannot expense items that occur before the project is approved by the Rotary Foundation. But this instance, expenses incurred basically a month ago, the 15th of March and later, may be included in your FY21 grant application if it's a COVID-19. Also, we got permission to repurpose FY20, that's current year district grants. We're aware that a number of clubs have projects that deal with schools and other events that make it very difficult in this time where we're being socially distant from each other. And so maybe some of the projects that clubs were originally thinking they could do, they probably can't do anymore. So what we may do is reuse that money. And how this will go is this way. A club wishing to repurpose toward a COVID-19 project for the current year, and there are still a few open grants from last year. They may also do that. Will file a progress report through the Club Runner district or grant module and explain where they are on the current project and what they want to do with the remaining funds. and that will go to Peter, and the committee will review it, and if it looks like it's good to go, we'll tell you to get going on it. So a couple key resources, the Grant Center on the RI website, and I'll be walking you through that. And also, I don't think a lot of people use the Rotary Foundation section of the district website, which is right here. You'll notice here's our district website, and up in the right-hand corner there, you see it highlighted. It says the Rotary Foundation, and when you move your cursor over it, there are a bunch of documents that pop up. For instance, if you want to know what the foundation committee does, there's the annual report. If you want to know the basics of the district grant and allocation program, there it is. If you want to know how much you could expect for your district grant, there's district grant baselines. And as Peter will show you, there are also documents that you can access information in his presentation on the district grant program. So with that in mind, are there any questions at this point?
Tom, we had a question in the chat about whether the participants can get copies of the slides.
Peter's, I think, are already up there, and as you said, we're already recording the thing, and I plan to put my slides up there probably tomorrow or the next day. So,
thank you. Any other questions, either through the chat or raising hands?
And just because you're about to take attendance, I just got a call from Greg Hallstrom, and I think that he's still having problems. So, Ann, if you would work on taking attendance here, I'll see if I can fix this.
Okay, so I have everybody who has been scheduled. I sent everybody a little chat saying that I registered you, so you can get credit for tonight. The only person I need confirmation from, there's a phone number there, and it says 505-400-1776. So I just need to confirm who that number is. If you can unmute yourself and verify your name, please, and what club. Nope, nobody's claiming it.
I just unmuted them. Can they speak up?
I'm thinking it could be Marie Sauter, but I'm not sure.
I was just talking to Greg Hellstrom, and that's him.
Oh, the 505-400. Okay, excellent.
Well, he's 505-828.
Okay, so there's another. So there's one other number that's there. I'm thinking it could be Marie from White Sands, but I haven't gotten a confirmation yet.
Okay.
Okay. So I will look for Greg in just a little bit. Thank you. Everybody else has been accounted for. Thank you.
Okay. So let me introduce Peter Fowley, our district grant chair from Silver City. And you better fasten your seatbelts because he's got a powerful presentation for you. Take it away, Peter. Let me stop share.
Now, can everybody hear me? I hope so.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes. You're a little soft, but we can hear you.
I'm a little soft, huh? Maybe my voice tonight, I don't know. Anyway, I want to welcome all of you. We're really excited that so many people are thinking about applying for a district grant. That's really one way by which the district can have a real impact, and the Rotary Foundation on local communities. And we really encourage you to apply for district grants and to work these projects. And I'm going to make a presentation that's going to tell you quite a bit about how to do that. It may be a little intimidating, but I assure you that applying for a grant and using the grants module in making reports and so on is not as difficult as it may look at first glance. So let me start by sharing my screen, and I'm going to try to get you to the district website and show you where we go from there. Let's see here. Can you all see the district homepage? I hope so. Tom already pointed out to you there's a tab here called the Rotary Foundation, and under it you will find a number of interesting things, as he pointed out. One of them, which is particularly important, is the district grant agreement for this coming year. This is a document that you're going to have to download and read very carefully, and then sign and have your incoming club president sign. And then you'll have to scan it and upload it back into the district, into the grants module under the document section. And you'll learn how to do that shortly. So the district grant agreement is particularly important. Secondly, you want to go down to the Foundation Training District Grant Basics, and you see a submenu there, and you want to go to the very bottom link, and that is the link to this slideshow that I'm going to start right now, okay? You'll want to be able to look at that slideshow on your own because it has a lot of individual links in it that you will find useful. So remember how to get there. You go to the Rotary Foundation, and you go to Foundation Training District Grant Basics, and you go to the slideshow at the bottom of the submenu here. So I'm going to go there right now to that slideshow. Takes a bit to come up. And here we are. So I'm going to give you a brief overview here of what I'm going to be talking about. First of all, we'll be talking about the prerequisites for applying for a district grant. They also apply for global grants, basically. Then we'll talk about the grant application process itself. And then I'll go through the district grant agreement, at least those issues which I think are particularly important without suggesting that you shouldn't read that agreement. You should read it. And finally, I'm going to talk about how to manage a district grant project. So there are 4 stages in this presentation, and we'll start with the prerequisites. We have a number of things you have to have taken care of before you can apply for a district grant. Number 1, your club has to be in compliance with IRS tax return requirements. The IRS requires the club to file a 990 form, which is a tax return, and it has to be filed every year, usually in November. If you're not in compliance with that requirement, you can't apply for a district grant. You can use this link here to find out if your club is in compliance. If you go to that link, this little window comes up and you put in your club number. I'll put in my club number right now for Silver City and log in. Notice no password is required. Just log in with the club number. And you will get an answer which tells you that the IRS database was last accessed on April 13th. and that in this case, the Silver City Club is in compliance as well as it's a foundation. If you're not in compliance, it'll tell you that too. So this is very easy to do, okay? Let me get out of here. Remember, just the club number is needed for getting in here. Now, secondly, your dues to the district and to RI have to be up to date. They are separate dues, so you have to make sure that both are paid and that your club is in good standing with the district and with RI. That's a requirement. Also, if you've had prior grants, either global or district grants, we want to make sure that your reporting on those grants has been done on a timely basis. And we'll talk about the deadlines for district grants, for reporting on district grants. But if that's not in order, then you also can't apply for a new district grant. And of course, we need 2 club members to apply to attend this training. And if you're here, that is a good sign for you. And finally, you have to submit the signed and initialed district grant agreement. As I pointed out before, you can find it there on the district website. You download it, you club president sign it and initial it, and then you scan it back in and upload it into the document section of your grant application. You'll learn more about that. That's a very important step. And finally, you have to be able to access the grants module on the district website and learn how to use it. And I'm not going to go through all of that. I will mention some of it as we go along, but I've put together a separate slideshow for that. And I'll show you, you just follow this link here and you'll get into that slideshow. And the way that works is almost every page of that, every slide that you will see is of this kind, where there's a picture of something and an arrow. And the arrow tells you generally where to click. Okay, so for example, to get into the grants module, you start out by logging into the district website. So you click on member login, okay? And once you've done that, you get another slide that looks like this. This is the login page where you put in your login name and your password, and then you log in. And once you've done that, you get another version of the district website, but now you're logged in, and there's a tab here called Member Area, and you click on that. Okay, and once you've done that, then you will get another a page where there is a tab called Grants, and you click on that, and so on. This slideshow you could work through all by yourself, and I hope you can understand it and manage to learn how to use the grants module. If you have trouble with it, the person to call, I guess, would be me. And I will give you my contact information at the end of this presentation. So I'll get out of this special slideshow and go back to the original. So remember, to get to that slideshow, you have to be on this page and click on this link. Okay. So those are the prerequisites for applying. And now let's talk about the actual application process. The application process takes place in 2 stages. First, you make a preliminary application, which is very simple. And then if that gets approved, then you go into the full application and you give a budget. So I'm going to talk first about the preliminary application. As I said, it's quite simple. It's really, in most cases, a 1-pager. uh, like this one. When you're in the grants module, this is what it would look like. You give the project name, indicate where you're from, city that you're in. You give a brief description of what you're planning to do. It has to be descriptive enough so that the grants committee can figure out whether it sort of meets the criteria of district grants. And then you put in the sponsoring club, your club name, which is, that you'll find a list there of all clubs that are qualified to apply. So your club has to be in there. And then you have to list a contact person, and that would be you. And again, that'll be, look at a list here, and if your name is not on the list, you can't do it. This is a list of all qualified people. All the people have gone through this training. So hopefully your name will be on the list. And then you indicate your estimated budget for the project, the total budget, no details at this point, okay? And then you click on update, and that's it for the most part. Now, I say for the most part because after you've done this, sometimes you want to also indicate that you have partners in your project. And this information about the partner organization is directly below that introductory page that I showed you after you've clicked update. And you can list local club partners, that is other clubs that you're working with, or completely different organizations like a local school or a little league or a boys club, whatever the case may be, okay? In each case, you do that by clicking on this add club button in the case of a club, and you'll be asked some questions about that club. You fill that in, and then you go down here. If you have another partner organization other than another club, you click there, and again, you will respond to questions about that partner organization. So, but that's all quite simple, I think. And that's the extent of the preliminary application. As I said, for many of you, it'll just be that first page. Now, once the preliminary application is in, you will, whoops, let me get rid of this thing here. You hopefully will get approval from the grants committee to proceed. The approval depends on your first having met the qualifications to apply for a grant in the first place, as I mentioned before. And secondly, we look at whether your project complies with the district grant guiding principles that you find in the district grant agreement, okay? And some of the important aspects of that are that the project has to be of a humanitarian nature or a scholarship project aligning with the Rotary Foundation mission, okay? It must have lasting benefit to the targeted population. You need to be able to explain why that is the case. And it has to be within the District 5520 boundaries. You can't have a project that takes place in Pennsylvania, for example. And finally, it has to be a Rotary project, even if you're partnering with another organization. That's one of the things you really have to keep in mind. You can't just work with another organization and say, oh, they have a wonderful project, we'll give them $5,000 and let them do it. That's not the idea. The idea is that it's going to be your project, even if you're partnering with another organization. And I'll have more to say about that in a minute or two. Okay, so that's the basis for the preliminary approval. Now, if you've gotten the preliminary approval, then you can move forward into a full application. And on the page where the preliminary application was, you will see these tabs. And if you go to the application tab, you come up with a page like this that will ask you to respond to 5 questions, basically. These 5 questions. In each case, when you click on one of these, it'll open up a little window and you can fill in a narrative. In this first case, providing a general description of your project. In the second case, explaining how you decided that the project was important and impactful. And in the third case here, why you figure it's going to be sustainable in the sense it'll have a lasting impact on either the organization or the people that it's addressed to. And then you'll be asked again to list the cooperating organizations. And finally, you'll be asked to give an implementation plan. So this full application is a little more extensive than the preliminary application. Once you've done that, then you have to go to the budget tab on that same page. And that gets you into a page that looks like this. And when you get there, you have to fill in information about all the expenses you expect to have for the project. And each expense item that you're going to list, you list by clicking on this button here, add a budget item, okay? And there you'll be asked to supply information about what the item is, a description of it, who the supplier is, what the local amount is, and what currency and so on. And you do that for each budget item. And then in addition, you have to supply the income side. And on the income side, you use this button down here, and you will indicate, first of all, how much of a district grant you expect to get. And secondly, any other contributions that will be used to make up the total budget for this project. Usually there are contributions from the club or from other people, and you will list those, each of them. I want to point out that the district grant need not be matched by you. There's no matching requirement. But of course, many clubs will want to add something to the district grant in order to have a more effective project. So that's certainly recommended, but you are not required to match the district grant. So that's the budget page. And that takes care of the application. And once that full application is in, the narrative as well as the budget, it will be reviewed by the district grant committee along with all the other applications. We'll talk about the deadline in a moment, but after the deadline, the committee sits down and looks at all of the grant applications. And then hopefully it'll get approved. And if it gets approved, then you are in the position of having to implement the project. And there, the district grant agreement is very important. And so I want to talk about a few aspects of that that I consider to be particularly important. And I don't want to discourage you from reading the document. You should read the whole document. But these things here we'll look at briefly. First of all, the amount of the grant that you can expect to get. Let me go back. And secondly, we'll talk about the role that Rotarians are supposed to have in these projects. We'll talk again about working with partner organizations. We'll talk about what expenses are covered by a district grant. And finally, we'll talk about conflicts of interest, potential conflicts of interest. So let's talk about the grant amount. The grants generally consist of 2 components. First, there's a base amount. Now, the base amount is based on how much your club has contributed to the Rotary Foundation annual fund share 3 years ago. That would be in 2017-18. And 15% of that will be your base amount for your grant, okay? If you want to find out how much that is, you could follow this link here, which takes you to a table that Tom prepared that gives you detailed information about all the clubs in the district. I hope it comes up. Oh, here it is. And you can see in the rightmost column here, you see the base amount for each club for the 2021 Rotary year. As you can see, some of these amounts are pretty hefty, others are small, and some are zero. So some clubs will not get any base amount, and clubs that are entitled to less than $250 will also not get a base amount. The minimum base amount is $250, okay? So this table will tell you where you are with this, with the base amount. Now, the good news is that for many clubs, there is a substantial additional amount available. We call it the kicker. It's a bonus amount, which is based on your annual fund contributions this year, 2019-20, contributions to the annual fund. If your club has an average contribution per member per capita of $100, then you qualify for the kicker. And the kicker is calculated by taking an amount allocated by the district, a total amount from the DDF, dividing it by the number of clubs that are entitled to the kicker, and then each of the clubs that are entitled to it will get the same amount out of that. In many cases, that usually amounts to $2,000 or more. So it can be quite a bit of money and can supplement the base amount significantly. If you're interested in finding out where you stand with that, there's another link I've provided here. If you click on that, you get another login. And in this case, you have to put in your username, which is your email address that you gave for this training, okay? I will put mine in here. And then you put in, as a password, you put in your club number. In my case, it's 1324. And you say submit. And then here it tells you that as of April 21, 2020, the Silver City Club has contributed $36.55 to the annual fund this year. It had 32 members at the beginning of the year, July 1. That's the basis on which these calculations are made. And so you divide 3655 by 32, and you get 114.22. So Silver City is entitled to a kicker this year. And you can go through the same steps, or with your email address and your club number to get that information, okay? So that's how you determine how much of a kicker amount you can look forward to. So that's how you calculate how much of a grant you can expect to get, roughly. Now let's talk a little bit about the role that Rotarians are supposed to play in these grant projects. Obviously, the project has to be proposed by a Rotarian. And secondly, you have to make sure that the project is identified as a Rotary project. It cannot be somebody else's project. And you have to have a substantial involvement in the execution of the project. Rotarians have to be involved. And if you're working with a partner organization, the the Rotary Club has to have a leading role in the project's management and direction. Okay, you can't just give money to another organization and let them run the project totally on their own. You have to have a leading role in the whole project. So keep that in mind when you make your proposal.
Peter,
Yes.
we've had a couple of questions and suggestions through the chat before you go on. Maybe we can bring them up now.
Yep.
One is, how do you find out your club number? And then a follow-up or a similar one just said, as a suggestion, on that screen where you put in your email and password, if you can change it to say club number, it'll remind people to put in their club number instead of a password.
Okay, that's a good suggestion. I guess I'll do that. How do you get your club number? My goodness. I thought you all knew that. If you don't, ask your president or your secretary or somebody who knows. It should be easy to find out. Or you can go, I think you could probably go on your website, on the district website. Let me see if I can go back there. I think you may be able to go, if you log in. I don't know if this works. Let's just see.
Peter,
Yes.
this is Tom. If they go to the in Club Runner, the club page, it has the number.
Well, yeah, I told you how to get it. Just on the home page, on the district home page, just on the left-hand side. Let me go back.
You got
On
club.
the left-hand side, you see the, whoops, I went past it. You see club directory and contacts. You click on that, okay, and you go down, and your club is on the list somewhere, and the club number is the club ID here, okay? So that's how you can get it. All right.
Thank you.
I'm supposed to change that password to club number. Okay, I'll try to do that. Were those all the questions for the moment, Jeff?
Yes.
Okay. So let's talk about partner organizations. You can have one or more partner clubs, usually clubs that are near your club that you might be working with, or you can have non-Rotary partners like a school or a little league team or whatever. So we'll look at each of these. Partner clubs are clubs that really are going to work on the project with you together. And that means that they can pool their grant entitlement, district grant entitlement with yours, so that you can really maximize what you can get and have a greater impact. The partner club has to be from District 5520, and it has to make its own application and budget, which would wind up being pretty much the same as yours. And it must identify which of the clubs is the lead club in the project, okay? Please understand that if another club is willing to kick in like $300 to help you with the project, that's not what makes it a partner club. A partner club is a club that also makes this project its project. So it must also apply through the same process as you for a grant. Non-Rotary partners or other organizations, usually nonprofits or schools, that you'll be working with. And that's a good thing to do, obviously, because that gives you more bang for the buck usually. But keep in mind that you cannot finance such a partner's ongoing project. And keep in mind what I said before. The club has to have a lead role in the management and direction of the project, even though you're working with another organization on it. And the project has to be identified as a Rotary project. The one thing we don't want to see is that you take the district grant and just turn it over to another organization and let them do as they please with it to complete a project. That would not involve you properly in the project at all. So these are the conditions that need to be met if you're working with a non-Rotary partner. Now let's talk briefly about what expenses can be covered by, or not covered, that for that matter, by a district grant. Under normal circumstances, if you're applying for a district grant, you can only cover expenses that are incurred after the grant is funded. That's the normal situation. We're in a little different situation right now because if you're applying for a COVID-19 relief grant, you can actually cover expenses that were incurred on March 15th or later. Tom already pointed that out. So that's a very special situation. This year it doesn't apply in other years. And also, as Tom pointed out, you can apply for a special district grant for a community assessment for a global grant in the amount of $500. That would be a special application, and it can come at any time, and the timing would be related to the timing of the global grant. There are no deadlines for that. And as Tom pointed out, it can be in addition to a normal kind of district grant, if it comes to that. Now, there are also a number of prohibitions in terms of what expenses can be covered by a district grant. For one thing, travel, salary, and administrative costs are not covered. And you can't use a district grant to pay for land purchases or building purchases or construction. And you also cannot pay for an ongoing project or for operating expenses of another organization. Very important. And finally, and this is something you want to keep in mind, you are not supposed to use the district grant for fundraising expenses. Some clubs tend to throw in to their grant proposal the fundraising aspect of the project. That you should not do. The fundraising is a separate operation. You will have, if you do a special fundraiser, you will have money to put toward the project, but that is simply a club contribution. And we don't really care how you raise the funds for it, I must say. You can talk about that in your narrative, in your reporting, but it should not be part of your budget.
Peter, we just had a chat question about the building construction.
Yes.
Can the money be used to revise or improve existing structures?
Well, that's a good question. I think it could. We've had projects that involved putting in constructing a new room for sales of items for a nonprofit organization and things like that. So I would say yes.
Okay, thank you.
Now, briefly about conflict of interest. The Rotary Foundation has a pretty detailed conflict of interest policy. And if you go into the grants module, there's a tab called District Grant Documents. And in there is the conflict of interest policy. You click on that, and you should probably read it carefully. What the Rotary Foundation tells you is that your projects should not benefit members of your club or either other Rotarians or their families. And they also should not benefit another organization in which a Rotarian, a member of your club, has a financial interest or is a director of, for example. Those are restrictions that you have to keep in mind. Sometimes you may be wondering whether a conflict of interest exists. If it does, if as a potential for that, it should be disclosed. And if you have any questions about it, you should get in touch with Ann Scott, our stewardship chair, and discuss it with her. Sometimes these things can be resolved and other times they can't, but it's important to keep these in mind. So that's the whole story on the district grant agreement. And now I'll spend a little time talking about how to manage a project. First of all, we'll talk about the point of contact. That would be the person who puts in the grant proposal initially and then later submits reports. And he or she must also be willing to respond to questions that come from a district in response to reports, for example, or in response to the initial application. It must be a person who's gone through the grants training. It can be the project manager, but doesn't necessarily have to be. The grants manager, the project manager, could be the same as the point of contact. It may be somebody else. But he or she has a list of things to worry about. Number one, a timeline should be established at the outset so you don't let time get away from you and without the project being taken care of. And then the project manager ought to assign responsibilities. You can't do it all yourself. You need somebody to handle media relations, doing news releases about the project, taking pictures or videos, possibly going on the radio. We want you to blow your own horn. It's important for your club, it's important for Rotary, it's important for the district, it's important for membership. This whole thing has been brought home to me because I used to be the media relations person in my club some years ago, and I thought I was doing a pretty good job. But this year we now have a new person. The media relations operation has languished a bit, and now Sonny McFerrin, our new PR person, has been handling it. She puts out news releases a mile a minute. For every club meeting, she has a news release announcing who the speaker is and inviting people to attend. And if we have a project we're working on, she'll put out news releases about that. The effect of all of that is that our attendance at Rotary meetings has increased, and we've been able to increase our membership. So this is something that you really want to put emphasis on. Now, as you're running a project, the financial management is important. You want to, first of all, deposit your grant check within 15 days of receipt. You need to keep separate accounting for the project, and you have to require that invoices or receipts are obtained for all expenditures. Now, this may be something that your treasurer will do. It's not something the project manager necessarily has to do, but you need to assign this responsibility to somebody. And documentation is also important. We would like to see photos of Rotarians in action, newspaper articles. That would be the result of your media relations efforts, I'm sorry. And you need to have copies of invoices or receipts or canceled checks showing that you actually paid out the money. They have to match up with your financial statement. And all of this information, if the project manager is not the point of contact, has to be provided to the project manager. And the project manager, if she's not the point of contact, has to have gone through this grants training as well. So that is the project managing responsibility. As far as reporting is concerned, There are deadlines which I'll show you. You have to do narrative and financial reports and provide documentation. The deadlines are here. May 1st to June 15th is the time for the initial application, okay? And then if that is approved, if your application is approved, then you have to make a first report by March 31, 2021. And then further reports every 6 months, basically. September 30th is the second one, March 31 of the following year is the third one, and then the final one would be June 1 of 2022. Of course, any one of these intermediate ones could be a final report, but in each case you want to indicate, is it a progress report or is it a final report? So keep these deadlines in mind and try to meet them. The reporting consists of a narrative report, which you do by going to the individual project report tab in the grants module. You'll see an outline, and you want to be sure, you want to follow that outline and date the report and indicate whether it's progress or final. That would be the narrative report. Then you have to do the financial report, which you get to by scrolling down from the narrative report. Now, the financial report is not your budget. It shows the actual income and the actual expenditures that you can document. And the budget remains unchanged. All of this information goes into the financial report. And that has to match up with the documentation that you provide, particularly the expenditures. So if you have expenditures you can't document, you can't put them into the financial report. And as I pointed out before, the documents, the invoices or receipts have to be uploaded into the documents section.
Peter, we just had a kind of an urgent chat.
Yes.
If you could go back to the deadlines, I guess
Yes.
they needed to see what they were again.
Yes. Is there a question about that or just?
They just wanted to see them.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to see them real fast. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. So as far as the documentation, as I said, invoices and receipts for all expenditures. For the final report, these invoices and receipts must match up with the expenditures in the financial report. If there are too many invoices, it would be helpful if you also provide a tabular listing of them, so I don't have too much of a tough time in understanding what you're doing. And you also should, if you can, provide photographs of Rotarians working the project and evidence of media coverage. That means newspaper articles or links to videos or radio interviews, for example. So that's the documentation we look for. Now that's the whole story on the implementation. And for additional resources, you can go to the home page. Tom pointed out, you look at Grants 101, that's a very helpful document. At the bottom of the home page, you get instructions for logging in if you need that. And finally, if you need additional help, get in touch with me. Here are my telephone numbers and my email address, okay? I try to be available at all times, but probably you don't want to call me after 9 o'clock at night. So that's it. And now, if there are any questions.
So Peter, there were a couple of chats that were follow-ups to the question about the building construction. I don't know if they got their questions answered. So for those of you who chatted a question about that, if you want to go ahead and ask your question, go ahead and unmute and you can ask your question. Otherwise, we'll assume that you had your question answered.
I have a question because I'm looking at putting together a project for the colonias of Doña Ana County, and many of the homes that these people live in have leaking roofs. These are motor homes or mobile homes, and I was wondering whether funds could be dedicated to repair the roofs of these existing homes and would meet the guidelines.
Well, I have my doubts about that, honestly. Usually what we say is that what you can do is pay for equipment that goes into a building. For example, we've had a club that provided a big freezer for an organization and things like that. But building construction per se is usually not covered. I think what you're describing would fall in the construction area, and I thought that would be acceptable. I don't know, Tom may have a different view here.
Well, I think in fairness to everybody here, we need to get on with the rest of the presentation because we're likely to be on you guys' time. We can discuss that one offline or after we get done with the major thing.
Okay, in that case, I'll get out of here. Thank you for listening.
Okay, let's do this one. All right. Thank you, Peter. As I said, we need to be moving on. I will talk about global grants here. First of all, the difference between district grants and global grants, obviously the size, and second major difference is who administrates them. The Rotary Foundation administers global grants. The district administers district grants. Global grants have a minimum project size of $30,000. That's based on the minimum foundation grant of $15,000. International partners are required, except as I noted for the COVID-19. And at least 30% of the funds must come from international partners, that is outside of the host country. Again, there's an exception for COVID-19 on that. Community assessment is required. Projects must be sustainable. Global grants must hit at least one of the 6 areas of focus. And just for general information, the district matches up to $15,000 normally of club cash. These are the 6 areas of focus. You probably have heard them before. Peace building and conflict resolution, disease prevention and treatment, water, sanitation, hygiene, maternal and children's health, basic education, literacy, and community economic development. You notice 3 of them have asterisks, and that's because the trustees adjusted those areas of focus within the last year. So what are the areas of focus in HAP? So we are going to go looking for the Grant Center, and we will find answers to a lot of things here. You have to log in. Remember, I said it's administered by the Rotary Foundation, and you start out at rotary.org, and right in the middle of the screen there is My Rotary. If you have not already logged in or have the login and password, you'll have to do that before proceeding. So let's click on My Rotary. You get a screen that looks like this. Notice there are various broad categories, but one of them is called Take Action. The third column over from the left is Apply for Grants, and it's, notice the very first one is Grant Center. That's where we're headed. Now, when you click on that, this is what you get. It describes district grants and global grants. By the way, district grants on this website is the one district grant that the district is allowed to apply for, and that is a compilation of all of the club grants. And that's something that Peter and the governor and I do. The first stage is draft. You're gathering information, you're figuring out which area of focus you're in, you're doing things like your community assessment, you're figuring out sustainability and so forth. And this can take anywhere from a month to a year or more, depending on the project. Once you've got everything the way you want it, and you've talked to the district, meaning me in this case, then you may be prepared to go to the authorization process. To do that, you must lock the grant. And when you do that, you can't change it anymore. And to make changes, we actually have to get the headquarters involved, and it's a pain. In authorization, the foundation chairs and district governors that have committed district designated funds to the project must sign off on that. The foundation chair for the International Host Club and the Host Club have to approve the project, and the points of contact for the International Host Club and the Host Club, as well as their presidents, also have to approve the project. And once all of those authorizations have been made, it automatically goes to submitted status. In submitted status, this is the first time that the Rotary Foundation grant officers actually look at your project, although many clubs back during the draft stage asked for an unofficial review by the grant officers, and normally they're willing to do that and can provide some pretty good insights. And that can take anywhere from, the shortest I've ever seen is a week to a year or more. And do not be surprised if the Rotary Foundation grant officers come back with questions. And there will be a back and forth typically between the host club and the grant officers until it finally is either approved or we finally determine that we just can't do this project. So once the foundation grant officer approves it, there will be an email going out to the host district and host clubs stating that the project has been approved. At this point, this is when all the clubs start sending their money into the Rotary Foundation that they have committed to this project. And the host club normally is the one that establishes a bank account, provides the information about that bank account to Rotary. And once all of the money is received by Rotary, then it will be wire transferred into that bank account. The date of the wire that the money is transferred into the bank account starts the calendar on your annual progress report. And from this point, the project will go on probably for several years because there are lots of things that you have to do besides doing the project. You have to evaluate the effectiveness, go back and take data and so forth. And then you finally get to write your final report. Notice down at the bottom here, it says apply for a grant. And most of us being Rotarians would probably click on that and leap into starting the electronic version of your grant. I, on the other hand, would suggest to you that you hold off on that and go over and look at the right-hand side where it talks about grant resources. Notice here we have things like areas of focus policy statements, the results of the community assessment, the grant calculator. Down here somewhere says guide to global grants. a whole bunch of really key documents, which I have listed up here. These are the ones that I would download first and have them available. And you can do a lot before you even get into the computer aspect of it. First one is Guide to Global Grants. It's a 40-page document. Rotary is good about writing manuals for things. This is the index page. Notice the major topics here. Make a sustainable impact. Remember, we said that it has to be sustainable. How to partner to maximize your impact, how to plan your global grant, how to apply for it, how to implement it, monitor and evaluate it, and then finally how to report. So you'll want to be familiar with this before you go charging off into the wild and woolly world. The next one is area focus policy statements, and this is a partial example of one of the 6. This one is for peace building and conflict prevention. Notice the very first one topic up here is area focus statement and purposes and goals, and it lists several. By the way, the little green leaf means that's environmentally friendly, that one. But what you're going to do as you read through all 6 of these is think about your project and try to figure out where it fits with one of these 6. So the first one is the goals and purpose. The next one is parameters for eligibility, things that you would need to do to qualify for area focus, peace building and conflict. Down at the bottom, you can just see the top of the next one. It's a list of things you cannot do for peace building, and then below that would be a list of things that successful projects, things that they normally would have. So each one of the 6 areas of focus walks you through all of these different areas. So you're going to want to be familiar with this. And what you may find is people that have been involved with global grants is your project will probably hit more than one of these. But rather than select more than one, I would suggest you get the one that's the closest fit, because if you have more than one, then you have to meet all the requirements of every one that you select. So it's just better to pick the ones that's closest and go with that. Next one is the application template. This mirrors the electronic version, but the nice thing is you can use a pencil and eraser on it and change information as you go very easily. And notice how it walks you through what's, and Peter kind of did this with the district grants. What's the name of your project? What type of project are you talking about? Is it humanitarian, vocational training, scholarship, or what kind is it? Who's going to be your international partners and points of contact? Who's the host partner in contact? Project overview. Tell me a little bit about your project. There's the area focuses over here. How are you going to know that you hit the mark? How are you going to measure success? And it goes down further on. And notice down here, it's going to ask you how you're going to collect the data and so forth. So the next one is the community assessment. Remember, we talked about that before. And again, this is the report that you'll have to attach. And it talks about who's the beneficiary, what's the demographics, who are these people? Is it a university, a local government, or what? When did you do the assessment? How did you do it? Was it a survey, an interviewed asset inventory? Did you community map or just do interviews? Who from the community participated? What needs are you going to address? The one below that is what needs that you identify that you are not going to address. And again, this can appear to be daunting, but does not necessarily have to be. And normally this would, excuse me, this would be done by probably the people from the host club. Next is sustainability. This is a one-pager, and it kind of pictorially gets you to thinking about the sorts of things that you need to be thinking about. Being a nuke, I always wanted to know what the final report's going to look like, so I make sure I get all the data, and here's the template, and it asks you some interesting thing. A lot of you may be scared by the very first question. Have your project's objectives changed? And they may well have, and that's not bad because we want to know what works and what doesn't work. So, you know, you may have thought the project was this and you got into it and you found out it was something else. How do you figure out the money? Well, you have a nice multicolored Excel spreadsheet, and this is one of the downloads, and you enter data over here for the host clubs and districts, who's putting in cash, how much DDF you're going to have. Notice here there's a column in maroon that has 5% in it. So when you commit to a project as a host, let's say you put in $1,000, there's a 5% surcharge. So when you commit to 1,000, you're really committing to 1,050. And I actually have a non-colored version of this that I use. Okay, so let's talk about money and global grants. This is actually a breakdown of an ongoing project in Monclova in District 4110 in Mexico. Notice there were 4 clubs that gave varying amounts of money, and it totaled up to about $7,450. For Radcon math, I'll call it $7,500. And the district matched it for $7,000. The district does not always have to match what the clubs put up, but we try to here in 5520. Likewise, here in 5520, we had 4 clubs that put up varying amounts, totaling about $3,100. I'll call it $3,000, and we matched that. So the money in this column here, it's called club funds, is matched 50 cents on the dollar. The DDF, district designated funds, district money, is matched dollar for dollar. And you notice down here, the World Fund put in about $15,375. So let's see where that came from. Well, we had about $7,500 of club money from 4110, and we had about $3,000 from District 5520. So that's $10,500, which would be half of that, 50 cents on the dollar, would be $5,250. And we have about $10,000, 7,000, roughly 3,000 of district money, which is matched dollar for dollar. So that'd be another 10,000 plus the 5,250. So in round numbers, it would be about 15,250. The exact number here is 15,375. So in general, what happens is if the district matches dollar for dollar, then, for instance, this $1,000 here would turn into 3,500, 3.5 times. So that's the magic of leveraging and global grants. So now it's time to go find our grant, and we've been looking for my grants, and there it is, right there, right in the middle. So let's click on that, and what you will see is something that looks like this. First of all, I'm logged in as me, and I'm the foundation chair, which means I see all grants that the district has, you will be, when you log in, you'll see grants that your club is involved in. Not quite as many. This is about the bottom of the draft column or draft category, and there's about 50 of them in there right now. Authorization, we have one. In that stage, there are 5 that have been submitted but not yet approved, and then there are a bunch in the approved status. Notice the very first one down here is a DG number. That is the current year district grant. So let's take a look at some of the ones here in approved. There's our district grant, of course, and you see most of them have a green paid. That means all the money has been collected and all the money has been transferred into the project bank account. But there are 3 here that are partially paid, and that happens sometimes because the project is meant to be done in stages. So the Rotary Foundation gives you the initial amount of money. When you report you're done with that, then you get the next and so forth. Notice here our purified water at your school, when this screenshot was taken, had a report due on the 29th of August. Well, let's go down here to look at Corazon de Niños. Notice it does not have a due date. Wonder what that means. Well, let's click on this, and this is what comes up. There was a progress report. That's the type. Status was submitted. It was due on the 12th of July. They use day, month, year here. And they got around to turning it in on the 7th of August of that year. But because it's still in submitted stage, it has not been approved by the Rotary Foundation grant officers yet. So there may be some back and forth on that, just don't know. Okay, roles and responsibilities. And a lot of this will be very similar to what Peter talked about, but when you sign up to participate in a global grant, you are in one of 4 categories. Either you are the host sponsor, who will primarily be doing the project. You are the international host sponsor. You're basically the host outside of the host country, or you are one of the partners for the host or international. And each of them has different responsibilities, although they kind of follow along with what Peter was talking about. The primary host sponsor will be doing the project under normal circumstances. They manage, execute it, they pay people, they keep the records. They are primarily responsible for the project reports that are due every 12 months. They communicate with all of the host partners. These are partners in the host country. They feed them updates on what the project is up to and tell them to send in the money plus the 5%. And they have a host committee of at least 3 qualified members. So if we were to use a recent District 5520 project, let's use Gallup's Southwest Mobile Clinic. Gallup is doing the project. So they are the primary host sponsor. The international host sponsor is kind of like the host, except they're outside of the country, and they also have responsibility for doing the reports, but they are primarily responsible for communicating with all of the international partners. Okay, in this case, the Southwest Mobile Clinic international sponsor is in India. And they are responsible for communicating with the other club in India that's in on this project, as well as 2 in Canada. The partners, we all join Rotary to do good in the world. And one of the things that helps us do that is telling people about it, including our own members. So, for instance, local education and PR. wouldn't it be nice if we could tell our communities that we're involved in Southwest Mobile Clinic out there in Gallup that's benefiting the Navajo Reservation? Wouldn't that be a good thing? And if we could tell them some details about that project. Wouldn't it also be a good thing if we could go out and visit the project if it's appropriate? Why don't we tell our members, in the Rotary Club of Albuquerque, we're doing so darn many things. I'm not even sure that most of our members appreciate all the things that we are doing through the global grant process. Why don't we take time, 5 minutes at a meeting and tell about the Southwest Mobile Clinic, or tell about the Navajo Soap Project up in Farmington or something. So these are the partners, and what they primarily do besides send in money is do PR. Okay, other stuff, I'm not sure it's written down, but here we go. Rotary Foundation only communicates with the two sponsors, the host and the international host. The host and the international host must communicate with their partners. And once you understand that, then when you sign up to be international host, you realize that you're coordinating with all of the international clubs. Both sponsor clubs share reporting responsibility, but if the international host does not handle the money, then they are kind of off the hook for the consequences. Use your foundation committee resources, which for global grants is primarily me. So please talk to me before you lock your grant. Periodically brief your club on the project. And remember, in this district, we work with District 4110 quite a bit. And a lot of our commitments in the projects we do are in District 4110. So when you make a commitment by district, make sure you make a copy of what you committed to, as well as the contact information for the club that you're making the commitment to. More stuff. Your global grant is club sponsored. You will be asked that question, not district sponsored. Club sponsored means the club is responsible for executing it. If you manage to click district sponsored, the governor and I will not sign off on it because we are not staffed to execute your project. Contact me before you lock the grant. It's a pain trying to fix things after it's locked. And one of the things I need to make you aware of before I will sign off on a global grant, I verify or with all the District 5520 participating clubs that their commitments are still good. Some of these things go on for a while, over a year sometimes, and people forget, or sometimes the club name is wrong. It's kind of like there are half a dozen clubs in Albuquerque, and somebody will just put down Albuquerque and thinking it's Del Norte or something. So anyway, your point of contact with Rotary Foundation is our grant officer, Cecilia Walter. She's actually very good. And I'm the global grant chair, among other things. So sorry for running a little bit over. Do you have any questions? Is anybody still alive out there?
Does not look like there are questions, Tom.
Okay. Okay. Well, while you're thinking about a parting question, I want to take the opportunity to thank you for being here. I know this was an option, and you had option to be someplace else. I want to thank you for your Rotary service and taking time to learn about Rotary and this aspect of the Rotary Foundation. A lot of people.
Tom, would you suggest, I'm sorry to interrupt, but would you suggest that before, when we do these applications, there must be something on there that says lock the application. Before we do that, we contact you to review the application?
Yes.
Okay.
A lot of people have questions about where does my money go? Why am I given to the annual fund? Well, the annual fund funds both of these grant programs. And if you would take a look at the annual report, and remember early on I showed you where that was up in the Rotary Foundation section, you will be amazed at what this district does. And that's you and your money and your clubs. So anyway, thank you so much. And Peter and Ann and I and the rest of the team are always available to help you out or answer your questions. Jeff, do you have something?
No.
Thank you, John.
Nope.
Thank you and have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, thank you.